Bonafide Reformer, Episode 3, Salmond's Legacy, The Fall of Devolution. The passing of Alex Salmond signifies more than the end of a political figure. It could also symbolise the death of the Scottish independence dream. For all his controversies, Salmond was the engine that drove the independence movement to the forefront of Scottish politics. His immediate successors, Nicola, Sturgeon and Humza Yousaf, however, presided over what can only be described as a series of disastrous leadership failures. This has not only weakened the SNP, but also raised serious questions about the very future of devolution itself. Under Nicola Sturgeon, the Scottish government became entangled in scandal, mismanagement, and an overemphasis on the independence question at the expense of real governance. Scotland's NHS was a prime example of these failures, with some of the longest waiting times in the UK, while education and infrastructure also suffered under her watch. Sturgeon's focus on a second independence referendum, even when the public mood was cooling, only deepened Scotland's internal crises. The arrival of Humza Yousaf marked a continuation and acceleration of this decline. His brief and ineffective time as First Minister was marked by severe policy mismanagement, particularly in healthcare and public services, culminating in his resignation amidst growing scandal and no-confidence motions. With Yousaf gone and the SNP in disarray, the dream of independence now seems more remote than ever. The system of devolution, introduced in 1997, was meant to give Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland greater autonomy to govern their affairs. It was heralded as a way to bring decision-making closer to the people, fostering cooperation within the UK. But in practice, devolution has delivered the opposite. It has turned into a potentially divisive experiment that has done more to sow discord than to promote unity. Instead of providing solutions, devolution has created regional bureaucracies that often underperform. Scotland, for instance, despite receiving higher per capita public spending than the rest of the UK, has witnessed worsening public services, as I've said. The inefficiency and poor resource management in devolved administrations have raised the question, has devolution made governance better or just more complicated? One of the strongest arguments for reconsidering devolution is the economic fragmentation it has caused. Scotland, despite benefiting from the Barnett formula, which ensures higher level of public spending per capita, continues to struggle with public sector inefficiencies and mounting debt. This imbalance, driven by political posturing and mismanagement, has left much of Scotland economically dependent on subsidies from Westminster, while failing to manage its resources effectively. The Barnett formula, while intended to ensure fairness, has become a source of resentment in parts of the UK, particularly England, which often finds itself footing the bill. This unequal distribution of resources has created a situation where devolved regions can overspend without accountability, knowing that Westminster will cover the gaps. In contrast, a centralised governance model would allow for more equitable resource allocation across the entire UK, addressing the needs of all regions instead of just a few favoured areas. By centralising governance, the UK could streamline decision-making, remove layers of costly bureaucracy, and ensure that public services are delivered more efficiently. The system of devolution as it stands has simply created a patchwork of inconsistent policies and economic fragmentation that does little to benefit the Union as a whole. Another consequence of devolution is that it has turned regional politics into a perpetual battleground, rather than a platform for effective governance. In Scotland, the SNP has used devolution as a tool to perpetuate grievance politics, continually pitting Holyrood against Westminster, rather than focusing on improving the daily lives of Scots. This adversarial approach has left Scotland in a permanent state of political conflict, where pushing for independence takes precedence over actual governance. Instead of empowering regions to govern better, devolution has given rise to regional elites who focus on exploiting divisions for political gain. Humza Yousaf, during his short tenure, was unable to govern effectively because his administration was too bogged down by internal SNP disputes and constant attempts to frame Westminster as the enemy. His resignation was a final admission that the devolution experiment had failed to deliver for the people of Scotland. From a broader perspective, devolution has done little to strengthen the United Kingdom either. In fact, it has undermined the Union by fostering regional identities over national ones. The political landscape in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales has become increasingly about differentiation, with regional governments seeking to distance themselves from Westminster rather than work in cooperation. This has weakened the cultural and political ties that once held the UK together. If devolution was intended to bring the nations of the UK closer together, it has achieved the opposite. The more power has been devolved, the greater the sense of separation has grown. This raises a critical question. Is devolution fit for purpose, or has it only served to fragment the Union? The case for abandoning devolution is not just about efficiency, but about national cohesion, about ensuring that the UK moves forward as one united country, rather than as a collection of squabbling regions. With the SNP in disarray and public confidence in devolved administrations at a low, now is the time to seriously reconsider the entire premise of devolution. The failure of Sturgeon and Yousaf's leadership has exposed the deep flaws in a system that was supposed to bring empowerment, but has instead brought division, inefficiency, and political paralysis. Abandoning devolution could restore national unity, ensure distribution of resources, and remove the layers of unnecessary bureaucracy that have hindered effective governance in devolved regions. Most importantly, it would put an end to the endless cycle of regional political antagonism that has characterised devolved government since their inception. With Alex Salmond's passing, the independence movement has lost its figurehead, and with Yousaf's resignation, the SNP finally lost its momentum. This is the perfect moment to rethink devolution and to consider whether abandoning it altogether would better serve the people of the United Kingdom. Such a course could offer a path to better governance, national unity, and a more prosperous future for all. Thank you for listening to the Bonafide Reformer podcast. This article was first published on Thursday the 17th of October on X at No Reforms.